cobalt, half of the world's supply was being consumed in electric vehicles and other electric or lithium-ion battery applications, and that's slated to only grow 62% by 2020.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into CrushTheStreet.com. I'm Kenneth Amaduri, and we have a situation where the world is truly screaming for more cobalt. More than 50% of cobalt production comes from the Congo, an area where children are being used and paid as little as $1 a day to mine this strategic metal. Now, Tesla, Microsoft, Samsung, and more are all trending towards sourcing their cobalt from legitimate places. And really, the free market is demanding this from a social perspective. And I have on the line Trent Mell, the president and CEO of First Cobalt, to talk to me today. We're going to talk about the macroeconomics of the cobalt story and also what is going on, with some of these mines and, what his company is doing to make a difference in it. And it's quite an opportunity. The company is making news as I speak to Trent today. Trent, thanks for coming on the line with me.
Thank you for having me, Ken. It's a pleasure.
Trent, only 2% of cobalt comes from primary cobalt mines, and the rest comes from nickel, copper, and silver mines. And cobalt has been on this parabolic uptrend, up 23 weeks in a row. So if you wouldn't mind, before we kind of start talking about the tragedies that are going on in some of these blood mine regions, what's going on with the enthusiasm surrounding cobalt?
Okay, well, first off, I think the whole market is being pulled, the mining industry that is, we're being pulled to find more as a result of consumer demand. So the story of cobalt is really the story of lithium-ion batteries. And despite its name, lithium-ion batteries, more than 80% of them do have cobalt in them. And in fact, the dollar value of cobalt in a lithium-ion battery today is almost the same as the value of lithium. So what has happened, you don't have to go back very far, go back a decade ago, and super alloys, so things like jet engines and gas turbines and industrial uses like that were some of the primary uses for cobalt. But fast forward to today with the advent of all our iPhones and all of our handheld devices, and in particular more recently the electric vehicle, and of course Tesla comes top of mind, and cobalt now is seen as a new age metal and one that's contributing to a greener economy. It's as of last year, cobalt, half of the world's supply was being consumed in electric vehicles and other electric or lithium-ion battery applications, and that's slated to only grow 62% by 2020 and onwards. So the consumers are pushing the miners to look what was once a byproduct metal to go out and find more and focus on that as a primary metal for exploration purposes.
So what are these companies such as Apple, Samsung, and Tesla actually doing to, well, we have a situation right now where blood mining is a major issue, and specifically in the Congo. And what are some of these big companies pushing for to ensure that we don't see that happen on a wide scale basis going forward here?
Yeah, that's a great question, because on the one hand we've got increasing penetration of electric vehicles. There's about 20 models out today. There's going to be a projection of some 70 plus in 5 years' time. So it's not just Tesla, it's Nissan, it's BMW, and it's Chinese companies we've never heard of, Ford, Volvo, you name it. So that the demand keeps growing and growing, and yet we maybe not horrific as it is, maybe not all that surprising that there are some awful practices that take place in certain corners of the world. So in December, Amnesty International came forward with a report and some real jarring images of young children working in artisanal mines, being forced to work there to help produce the cobalt that we put in our consumer goods. And it created quite a backlash. So to your point, companies, well, I take Elon Musk as an example. He came out and stated that he would only source his cobalt from North America. So it's certainly the right response to an awful situation, but the wrong remedy, because the North American market produces almost no cobalt, and it's impossible to get away from the DRC. So when you look at the market and you look at the problem that exists, there's about 3,500 tons of cobalt per year that could be classified as a conflict metal, and that's about 5% of the DRC market. The balance of it is not, but it's a real problem, and I think there are some remedies out there that we need to look to ensure that we squeeze out these awful practices.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. And I know blood mining a few years ago was popularized by the movie Blood Diamond. And I don't think many people thought that it was also happening in cobalt as well. It's much less known to that degree. Now, you brought up an interesting point here, and that is the Congo is not largely made up of this conflict mineral, but there's areas where legitimate practices are taking place. And you guys have an existing cobalt project in Canada, but you guys just released news that you're acquiring interest in 7 properties in the Congo. And tell us about what is unique about these properties, given the Congo has so much political stigma at the moment. How are you guys different?
Sure, not well summarized. When you look at the Congo, the size of that country is important to take note of. It's 2/3 the size of Europe, and the population base is some 80 million people. And so, much like blood diamonds, the conflict minerals, I guess concerns around the DRC have been focused up in the northeast, which is a long way from where we are. And the metals there in question were tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold, the 3 T's in gold as we call it. And so in addition to the blood diamond movement, there was an initiative driven by Dodd-Frank to ensure that any of those 4 metals coming out of the Congo or the neighboring countries went through an audit process to ensure the metals were clean. And so in tandem with our initiative, we're going to be rolling out what we call the Clean Cobalt Initiative to make sure that we follow some of the very same guidelines that exist with other metals. But to go to the deal that we've announced this morning, the properties in question are in the Katanga province, which is otherwise known as the African Copper Belt, which runs through the Congo and into Zambia. That's where a lot of the world's cobalt and copper are produced, and where a lot of the world's larger producers are situated. You got Ivanhoe there, Glencore, the largest cobalt producer in the world. And so the properties that we picked up, it's 190 square kilometers of land, and it's 7 assets. They're all in fairly close proximity to one another, and they're close to some existing operations like the Tenke mine and Kinsevere, and existing sort of known large operations. So our view is we're going to go in there, but we're partnering. Our VP Exploration lived in the Copper Belt for a number of years with his family. He knows the country. We're bringing in a Congolese director, and the group that we are working with is a well-known African team of explorers and developers and operators that will be our eyes and ears on the ground. So it's a measured approach. My own view in terms of our strategies, we've got a fantastic asset in Canada. It's a cornerstone asset for our company, but it's hard to ignore the Congo. As one analyst said, without the Congo, you don't have an electric vehicle market. And I think that as an elephant country, if there is going to be the next big find of cobalt, I think odds are it'll come in the DRC. And so from an investor standpoint, it's appealing. You just need to make sure you back it up with a team that knows what they're doing and will look after the company.
Sure. Well, hey, let's talk about the team a little bit more. I know you guys are stacked with lots of talent. If you would, please spotlight some of the key people that are on this team, and what investors have behind them. Who are they partnering with when they purchase shares on the open market of First Cobalt?
Great. Yeah, we're still a new company. I've been around 8 weeks, and yet in 8 weeks we've done a $6 million financing. We've got some good liquidity. We trade 400,000 shares a day, and we've done 2 property transactions. So while new, like a lot of the cobalt players, we're responding to a market demand. The team itself is basically comprised of people who have deep operational experience. So myself, I started my mining career at Barrick Gold, the world's largest gold miner. Worked a little bit at Sherritt, Rico Gold. I even ran a junior by the name of Falco Resources, which had followed a similar strategy to what we're doing in Canada at First Cobalt. So my career has been, other than Falco, has been with operating entities. So I've been part of some large teams that have operated and built mines successfully. And so in building up the company, it was important to me to differentiate ourselves from the other cobalt juniors by bringing in people who precisely know how to build and operate mines, as opposed to people who can tell a story and maybe find them, but not take it much further, because you've got to be in it for the long haul, and you can't just be sitting waiting for somebody to take you out. So Peter Campbell is our head of business development. He spent a good part of his career at Falconbridge as a mine engineer, and about 15 years in the latter part of his career on the sell side as an analyst in the mining sector. So knows the capital markets very well and is very, very strong technically. And then the other key hire I have is Frank Santaguida. Dr. Santaguida has got over 25 years of experience. He started with Falconbridge as well in base metals, and more recently spent almost a decade of his time with First Quantum. And First Quantum is the company that had him living in the copper belt and working in that base. And then we've got a couple of people here and there. Most of them are more advisories. It's a small team. We're pretty lean. I'm not taking a salary myself in this first year. So the idea is to keep the burn rate low, leverage our relationships, and put as much money as we can into properties and in the ground.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, Trent, let's talk about Canada then. You guys are diversifying here. You guys are in the Congo and also in Canada. Why is Canada strategic, in your opinion, with where you guys are, with your company's focus?
What's interesting with Canada is back in the 1920s and 30s, the camp that we're in, we often talk about Cobalt, Ontario, the Cobalt, and there's a twin sister town, if you will, called Silver Center, which no longer has a town attached to it. But in the 20s and 30s, these two centers were the largest, constituted the largest silver camp in the world. So 600 million ounces of silver, but at the same time, 50 million pounds of cobalt. And cobalt, you kind of took it as it came. It was not a focus. And if you got paid on it, great. If you didn't, it didn't matter. Really, silver was the driver. The camp, for the most part, dried up sort of 50, 60 years ago. There's been some production here and there, but it's not what it was. And so when we looked at this, our view was much like some of the gold stories you see across Canada, whether it be the old Osisko mining story or Detour or Young-Davidson, which is part of Alamos Gold today. A lot of these new 20-year type mines are really old mine sites revisited. So modern geoscience, new mining techniques, bulk mining opportunities, different commodity prices, and just a whole different approach to mining today allows you to mine economically what was not possible decades earlier. And so it's the same approach here. We went in and we got a dominant land position. It's more than a postage stamp property with 21,000 hectares. A very large land package at one of the largest producers. There were 140 properties that operated. This one was a top 10 producer and one of the best cobalt producers. So the idea is let's get as much land as we can and let's look at it from that lens of bulk mining and modern geoscience and see what is there. And the grades were pretty spectacular. It was producing at 58 ounces a ton, 0.5% cobalt to the extent they were recovering it, and you were getting a pound of cobalt for every 5.8 ounces of silver. So we believe this is a fantastic asset for exploration. No doubt we're going to see some spectacular grades as we start drilling it. We'll have our program out here shortly. But then the question for us and the question for our investors is, could we pull together enough tons to devise a sort of a company maker type mining operation some years out? So we're just about to get started on that asset. And it's 100% option, so we don't own it yet. But in the space of 3 years, we'll do our work, and if we like what we see, then we'll keep moving that forward.
Trent, I want to get your thoughts here, and if you wouldn't mind, not everyone likes to do this, but price projections. And if you want to take a stab at it, I know it's almost impossible, but cobalt is, been at the $25 range here, just going up astronomically, in the last 12 months. I mean, we're just seeing it go up and up and up, 23 weeks in a row without a down move. Do you have any thoughts as to how high this will go, and if 25 is the top, or could we see it go to 50?
Yeah, I've got, it's easier to talk projections in a base metals market, which is underpinned by some market fundamentals, as opposed to the gold space, where I spent a bit of my career where it's a lot of sentiment driving the commodity price. In this case, cobalt's been in the doldrums for a few years. So while true that the price has doubled, from $12 a pound to call it $25 a pound today, that's coming off a low base, and we only have to look back to 2007, 2008 to see cobalt having jumped to $50 a pound, so double where it is today, on the basis of a 9,000 tons shortfall in the market. And there are some analysts that are projecting precisely that. Given the state of the market over the last number of years, we have not been exploring. We haven't been spending money on new mines. And so as demand continues to grow, sort of some 5% a year, the projection for the supply growth rate is just not going to keep up over the next 5 to 7 years. And so we anticipate that there will be a structural deficit in the market, and that in turn is going to lead to some strong support going forward. So I feel good with where we are. Where we land, I don't know, but I see more upside than downside where we're sitting today.
Sure. And one thing that we should note is that there's really no ETFs or areas for investors to directly expose themselves to cobalt market other than the actual underlying companies such as yourself. So, I mean, could you speak to that a little bit and, the enthusiasm and what you see happening, in terms of investor momentum and where the capital flow is going?
Great question. And the reality is in modern times, there has never been a mining company whose primary lens for exploration has been cobalt. As you pointed out, Kenneth, 98% of production is as a byproduct. So these are nickel mines producing cobalt or copper mines producing cobalt. And previously we had some silver mines in Ontario doing just that as well. And so now to go out and say we're going to find cobalt is a little bit of a unique strategy. And my meetings with investors have been encouraging. And they look to electric vehicles and, battery packs have dropped. The cost of a battery pack is down 80% in 6 years. And the technology has such that you've got, 300-mile range is a reality. The recharging rates are getting faster and faster. So the penetration projections for electric vehicles is quite apparent, and I don't think there's any going back. So then they look at the underlying commodity and how do you get exposure to it. So our undertaking towards investors is we're going to try to give you the best leverage to cobalt, and we get leverage by going to multiple jurisdictions. You get leverage by looking across commodities, across the primary commodities, and hopefully trying to identify some early cash flow opportunities as well, so that we're not burning through a lot of money for G&A and exploration. So, we're moving fast. Our goal is to bulk up and to become one of the big players. There's a bunch of us that have popped up. We've got a solid team and a good treasury. So we hope to be that vehicle, that exploration vehicle that's going to go out and find the next big deposit.
All right, Trent, and if there's anything else that investors need to know about, or just exciting updates that would potentially people need to have on their radar for first cobalt here, some short-term catalysts that you see on the horizon, please share your closing thoughts regarding the company.
Yeah, I think there are some geopolitical issues in the DRC that people are watching closely. I think we're going to try to educate the market on the better side of mining in that country. But I think the catalysts are going to, daily you're seeing news with more and more auto producers investing infrastructure in new models and new countries. China is the leader there. So if you want to know EVs, we'll look to China. They've got a very serious existential problem of pollution there that's pushing us all forward. And I think the electric vehicle market, we follow that closely in our own news. That's going to continue to propel this industry forward. So the question is, with that knowledge, who are you going to turn to? Where are you going to turn in terms of a team and a company to give you that exposure in the marketplace? And as I say, we're hoping to move in that direction.
Awesome. Well, hey, Trent, thanks for coming on the line with me today. If people want to learn more about the company or partner, just please share the company's website and also where they can find you on the exchanges.
Sure. Our website is www.firstcobalt.com. We are on the TSX Venture Exchange under ticker FCC. We are also in the OTC Pink Sheets, although we should see our QB listing here coming out in a couple of days.
Awesome. Okay, Trent. Well, hey, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate the insight.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day.